In this tutorial, we are going to take again everything that we've done, and we're going to create a small health system for our player. Let's visualize the player's health. Let's add two items, one that's going to hurt the player, one that's going to heal the player. And finally, if the player is dead, we want to just remove the input from them and let's just display on screen they are dead. Now, I am probably going to give this to you guys as an exercise in class, but after class, if it's still something you want to do, hopefully this video is there to help guide. So, just as with anything else, it's always good to start about thinking about our requirements. So, I have this PowerPoint here, and this is probably one that I showed you in class. So let's just talk about what we want our health pickup per se to do, but our health system. First, in the BP first person pawn, so our player, we need an int or a float depending on the type of health system you want. I'm going to use an int, but we want some variable to hold the health. Do they have 3 health? Do they have 2 health? Do they have 1 health? Next, we need a boolean to see if they're still dead or alive. And I'm just going to make a boolean called isAlive. Finally, we want a function in our player that's going to either reduce the health or increase the health, and also check if they're dead. If they are dead, then we want to remove their input. We want to display game over, and as a challenge for you guys, we'll see if we can reset the game. Finally, we also want a player UI. This is going to display our HP, so we want some number displaying it. And we want to have some text that says game over. And it's got to be invisible by default or hidden. And only when the game is over do we want to show that, because we can't just show that when the game is not over. Finally, we want another pickup. So we have a coin, but we want another pickup that either hurts the player or that heals them. And just like with the other, just like with our other actors that we've made, we're going to give it a mesh, give it a collider, check if it's colliding with the player, cast to the player, and then run some function. Okay, so let's begin by doing this. I am going to first go into my BP first person. And let's start by adding those variables we said we were going to add. I will add health. For me, this is going to be an integer, and I'm going to have my player start with 3 health. Then I want to add a boolean, and I'm going to name this to isAlive. And this is going to be set to true. So there you go. That's the first 2 things that we've done. Next, I'm going to add another function, and I'm going to call it change health. On the inputs for this, I'm just going to call it damage, and I'm going to make this an integer. So whatever the damage is, I just want to subtract that from my health. If the damage is negative, that's just one way I can heal my player. So if I get a health pickup and it does a damage of -1, that's just going to make my health go to 3. So let's take our health, and we want to set it. What do we want to set it as? Well, we want to take our damage, and we want to subtract it from our health. And that's what we're setting our new health as. Next, we want to check if we're dead yet. So I'm just going to make a branch. And what I'm going to check here is if my current health is less than 0. Or really, I want it to be less than or equal to 0, because if they are at 0 health, they're also dead. So if it's false, we can just continue playing the game. If it's true, we want, for now, let's just print string game over. Cool. So now that we have this done, let's just use it. Let's make a small pickup and let's just use it in there. Actually, instead of making a new pickup for this currently, if I go back to my level blueprint, we have this death zone respawn box, whatever. Let's use that, because I think that makes more sense. When we walk into that, our player technically loses his health and they spawn back. I think that makes a little more sense to use, so let's use that instead. if I was to go into collision BP, here we can see that on begin overlap, when we check if it's the actor, if it is, we call this respawn event. So I'm just going to tag my damage player to the end of this respawn event. Currently it's called change health. I might actually just change that to damage player. And again, we're just going to use damage player and heal player kind of interchangeably. If we damage them for a negative amount, we're going to heal them. And I'm going to call this function here actually. And when they get hurt by this, I want to damage them by 1. So it should subtract 1 from their health, set their health to that. If their health is less than 0, we're just going to print the string game over. Otherwise, for now, let's just print a string just so we can see their health. And I'm just going to print HP equals and whatever their health is. So let's compile this, and real quick in my player BP, just to not confuse us for now, I'm going to turn this off. I don't want to delete it. So in the details panel, I'm actually going to come up here, type visibility, and you can see behavior visible. This is actually kind of a clue of our game over text later on, how we're going to make it invisible. But I'm going to change this visibility to hidden. Now when I compile and run the game, our score shouldn't pop up. It technically is there, it's just invisible. Okay, so now when I run through this kill box, it should damage our player by 1. Our HP is 3 when we start. When I run through this, we should see it go to 2. HP is 2. Let's see if we can kill the player, make our HP go to 1, and then it should say game over. It should print. So our HP is 1. Now our HP is going to be 0 when we run through this. And it says game over. Perfect, exactly how we wanted that. So now we know that our health code works here. We can also heal the player by using minus health. One quick note is maybe you don't want to heal your player over 3 health, so let's also account for that. So before we so once we set the player's health, before we run through this death code, what I'm going to do is just make sure that the health is less than or equal to 3. If it is less than or equal to 3, we can just continue along. You know, we don't have to change anything. However, if it's greater than 3, then we want to set our health to 3. So if this is false, we're first going to set our health to 3 so we can't overheal, and then we're just going to continue the thing. So all this branch is doing is it's checking if our health is greater than 3, so we're not trying to overheal. If it's false, we set it to 3 and we continue. If it's true, so if it is less than 3, we can just continue. This is just making sure it doesn't go past 3. Okay, so now we have that working. We didn't even need to make a new pickup. We already made this kill box, which is great. We can just use this kill box for that. And now let's get it displaying in the UI. This is the other cool part of this. So I'm just going to duplicate this text score variable and move it slightly down. I'm going to make my score visible again. Same with this one. It was hidden. Let's just make it visible. And instead of this saying score equals 0, let's say HP equals 3 out of 3. Let's just make it, I think that's fine actually. Yeah, let's just say HP equals 3 out of 3. Just as we did the score, make sure this is variable is checked on. Because I copy pasted it, it is. But I don't want it to be called text score 1. Instead, it's going to be called text HP. Now, in the graph, just like we have a variable called set, or a function called set score, you make a new function and call it set HP. And all I want set HP to do is set the text for our HP. What is that going to be? Well, we need an input. We're going to call this input health. And just like we did with the other one, I'm going to append the string to say HP equals then the health and then I want to say out of 3 because it's always going to be out of 3 health. Plug all that in. And lastly, when our health changes, we need to actually call this function. So for now, let's get rid of all these print strings. We know this works. So this branches if they're still alive. So let's get a reference to our UI, set HP, and set the health to our current HP. Perfect. So now when I compile and run this, it says HP 3 out of 3. Our score is 0. Come in here. And now our HP is 2. Our HP is 1. And then if we go through it again, our HP would be dead. So let's deal with that death case now. What happens when our UI, or what happens when our player's health is 0? Well, like we said, we want to display game over, and we just want to remove input so they know they're dead. And the way I'm going to do that is back in the player UI. I'm going to add one more text box here. I'm just going to have it take up the center of the screen. When you guys do this, make sure that you're positioning and aligning things well. Again, this is just for tutorial purposes. So we're just going to set this text box here, and I am going to make sure to increase the font size by coming in here to font and then their size. So let's just make it nice and big and say game over. Maybe a little smaller. And I also want to make it red because red's a mean color, and now we know the game is seriously over. Again, just as like we did with everything else, we want to use this in code, so we have to make it a variable. Give it a good name, text game over. And unlike our health and score, I want this to start as invisible. So I'm going to go to visibility and make sure it's hidden. Go back to our graph. And let's make a new function here again. So we'll come here, we'll call it set game over. Set game over. And game over is just going to take a boolean. It's going to ask, is the game over? And if the game is over, then we want to set our game over to visible. If the game is not over, we want to set it to invisible. So we'll add a branch node, connect this as game over. So if game is over, let's just drag this out, set visibility to true. So set visibility to visible. And similarly, if our game is not over, let's set the visibility back to hidden. And in our first person character, in this damage player function, if the game is over, what we want to do in our UI is say set game over, and we want to set that. Then is game over is true. And we also want to disable input, so our player cannot really play the game anymore. Let's run this. Our HP is set to 3. Let's just damage the player 3 times. So the next one should set our game over to true, totally disable our controls, and not let us play. So you can see it says game over. I can't play anymore. Great. Let's just real quick, again, there's 100 ways to do this. Let's just be a little, let's just get our players' control back in a, in some way or the other so that we can reset the game. To do that, I'm just going to make a new function called reset player. And what do I want this reset player to do? Well, I want it to damage the player, so I want to reset my player's health. Or instead of doing it like that, let's just set our player's health directly. So I want to set my player's health to 3 because that's them resetting it. Then we want to update the UI again so our player's health is updated. So let's do set HP. We want to enable the player's input again. And that should cover our reset. When we reset the game, we want to set the player's health back to 3. We want to make sure the UI is set, and we want to make sure that we enable their input so that they can move around again. Let's also respawn them so that they go back to their spawn point regardless of where they are because they've died. And let's see how we can call this function. Now, what I would ideally like to do is after we kill the player and we disable their input, I would like to delay the game for a little bit, you know, have them wait in this this game over screen for a bit, but we know there's no delay here, and I don't want to make an event for this like we did with the kill box. So let's see another way of doing this timer thing. What I'm going to use instead is called set timer, and we're going to use set timer by function name. I'm going to add it in, and there's really 2 things we care about here. There's a bunch of options, but what we care about is function name and time. So I'm going to give it a 5-second timer. So after we die, the player is going to just sit with that game over for 5 seconds, thinking about what they've done. And what function are we going to call? Well, I've made this reset player function, so I'm going to call that. And so when our player dies, BP game over is going to be, or UI is going to set this to true, so we'll see this game over text. Disable the player's input so they can't see anything. And finally, we're going to set this timer to 5 seconds, and then we'll reset the player. And also, while we do that, let's add a little more feedback. Let's just play a sound when they die. There's not too many different sounds here, so I'm just going to also play an explosion again when they die as well. And our reset player function is going to set the health, set the HP, as in it's going to set the UI. It's going to enable our input. It's also going to put us back in our spawn point again. The one thing I forgot to do was also to set game over because we don't want that to run anymore. And there you go. So now let's just see if this worked. Ooh, I did not compile that. Okay, so let's just see if this worked. I'm going to hit play. You can see my score is 0 and my health is 3 out of 3. Run into here. The score is 2. Health is 2 out of 3. This is our last point of health. And it says game over. We're waiting. It's going to wait for 5 seconds. And that game over is gone and my character can move again. So we get a second shot at this game. So there you go. Exactly like we've done our pickups and we've used it to affect the UI. We're just building out things slightly, one step at a time, making them slightly more complicated. But we have basically used all those same concepts. There has been nothing new here really that we have used. The only new piece of functionality that we have seen is in damage player. We see this set timer by function name. Everything else here is something we have learned earlier in class. We're just applying our logic to create the functionality that we want. And you can see how important these branch nodes become. Again, they help our code make decisions. Is our player's health full? We don't want to overheal them. Is our player dead? Like I told you guys, this is one of probably the most common branches you'll find in games, is just checking if we're dead or not. We've used that here. And just like that now, our player has so much more functionality built in, just in like a few steps. We have pickups, we have a bouncy pad, we have a kill box, and now we've created a small health system to go with that. Anyway, I hope you guys were able to accomplish this in class as the exercise, but if not, I hope this video was there to help you. Thank you for watching.